everyone. Welcome to Book Soup. Thank you for coming out tonight. If you have a cell phone, can you put that on silent, please? Thank you. We're so excited to be hosting Regina Charbonneau tonight. She's going to talk about her... Yay! She's going to be talking about her newest cookbook, Mississippi Current Cookbook. Regina has launched some pretty great restaurants, including King's Tavern in Natchez and Biscuits and Blues up in San Francisco. She's also the culinary director of the American Queen, which is a luxury paddle wheel boat that travels around the Mississippi. So please join me in welcoming Regina.
Yay!
Well, this is great because this is like a journey down the river with everybody. There's not a person here I don't know and love. This is great. So that have been some part of my journey down the Mississippi. So with a few detours, Alaska, but San Francisco. But anyway, I'll tell you about Mississippi Current if you have any questions. But I think most of you know my background, but I was born in Natchez, and I always say I spent 23 years trying to get away from Natchez and 23 years trying to get back. And I spent so much time on the Mississippi River. And when I moved back to Natchez, I left Natchez, went to Alaska, and I worked out in the bush of Alaska to save money to go to cooking school in Paris. I came back from cooking school, and my husband's girlfriend was sweet enough to introduce the two of us. So I met Doug then, and we've been married 33 years this August, which is hard to believe. So had a great 8 years in Alaska, moved to San Francisco, and when I opened several restaurants there. I opened Regina's at the Regis, which actually a lot of people, we go way back, Tim and I, to those days. And so Regina's at the Regis, I opened Regina's Sonoma in the wine country, and I opened, it's kind of interesting too, when I opened my restaurant in the wine country, I had, my first son, Jean-Luc, was about 2 years old, and I would drive back and forth. It didn't seem that hard. I was young enough, and I thought, a 2-year-old, 2 restaurants, no problem. I would drive to the wine country. It was about an hour and 15 minutes. I would start driving back, and when I would hit the Golden Gate Bridge, it was so beautiful I burst into tears. Well, it wasn't the scenery, it was hormones. I was 4 months pregnant with my son, Martin, and I didn't know it. So I did that, so I had 2 little boys and an hour commute, and so that was just too hard. And so I sold Regina's Sonoma, and I opened Shishi Beignet, a little martini bar, and that wasn't enough, and then I opened Biscuits and Blues, which is 19 years old now, in San Francisco. I was just in San Francisco, so it was neat. It was kind of old home week. And but anyway, so I was in San Francisco. I did a short stint in Minneapolis, which I think several people in the theater used to say, they referred to it as Minnie No Place. And my husband was from there. It was a great town, but just not for me. And spent some time in New York, but I had this pull to go back home. I think we all do that. And so I wanted to go back to Natchez, and I did. When I came back to Natchez, bought a historic home called Twin Oaks, and it was like the perfect thing for me to do. I had 6 guest rooms. I did cooking class weekends. I wrote a book, another cookbook called Regina's Table at Twin Oaks. But it was perfect because I could kind of be at home and work and be with my boys, and it was a great time to settle in. And I did that. And about 3 years ago, these 2 friends from San Francisco that had they used to own a company called Uncommon Journeys, and they had these historic vintage train cars, and I used to plan menus for them. And they said they were going to be in Natchez on business and wanted to come by, and so we were having dinner. And they said, we just bought a paddle wheel boat called the American Queen, and would you consider being our culinary director and working with us? I said, no, my youngest son is going to college and everything's kind of settled. My husband's able to spend more time at home. I said, I don't think so. And they said, please. And I said, okay. And I've been doing that for 3 years. So. But what was interesting to me as I started traveling on the American Queen, I had always been, the Mississippi River had always been so much a part of my life, kind of Beale Street to the Bayou. I know that area, really understand it well. But when I started getting on the American Queen and traveling to other parts of the river, it was so diverse and so interesting that I kind of had this idea, I really should do a cookbook that really shows the culinary trail up and down the Mississippi River. Last weekend I was at Macy's in San Francisco, and someone asked me, they said, what are the common foods you found up the river? And I have to say that was such a hard question, because honestly, it was eggs and chicken. Bacon maybe. That's it. There were not, if you go to the upper Mississippi, they don't have pecans. If you go to the deep south, past Beale Street, there are no black walnuts, but they're in the middle section. The nuts are different, the grains are different, it's really amazing how different. But what happened with the Mississippi River is when you go to the headwaters and and I divided the book into 3 sections because they're so distinct. The first section is the headwaters, which I did from Quincy, Illinois to St. Paul to Quincy, Illinois. So the headwaters are Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then kind of at Quincy, Illinois. And what happened in those, settling the upper Mississippi, you have a lot of the Polish, Germans, Lithuanians, all of the Eastern Europeans really settled in that area. And the Germans settled everywhere on the Mississippi River at some point or another and had a very heavy influence. But really the upper Mississippi was more Eastern European. And my husband grew up in a working class neighborhood called Northeast Minneapolis. And my first trips there when I met him, it was amazing to me to have everything on the plate was white, like pierogi. It was a dumpling filled with potato, topped with sour cream, topped with sauerkraut. I mean, I remember my one and only Thanksgiving dinner at his mother's house, and I decided from now on that whole damn family can come to me because everything on the plate was white. White turkey breast, white gravy. How she could make a fruit salad solid white, she managed. You peel the apples, if anybody wants to know, you peel the apples devoid of color, bananas, whipped cream, Cool Whip, whatever, Cool Whip and like Miracle Whip or whatever. Somehow she managed. So, and when I think about, and thank goodness, and I was able to find more interesting food, and it's terrible for me to dish my mother-in-law, but, this is where they had Spamwiches. She was trying to impress me, would grind the Spam and the Velveeta cheese. So anyway, Minneapolis was not the food capital, but it really is. And when you would get into the kitchens of these little church ladies making pierogi and doing different things, I mean, it really is a fascinating part of the country. And what happened is the whole face of the river, as I started getting into this, the face of the river has changed. After the Vietnam War, the Hmong population settled, and so the farmers market in Minneapolis all of a sudden had long beans and all kinds of spicy peppers, and everything became fresher and more colorful. They were wonderful farmers. And then in the lower Mississippi by the Gulf of Mexico, we have Vietnamese fishermen now. So the food has changed. So hence Mississippi Current. I took some older traditional recipes and gave them a little bit more of a current edge. So for example, the pierogi that I talked about, I decided I put my twist on everything. I don't say that I'm an expert on any of these cuisines, because really, if I'm an expert on anything, it's Southern cooking with a little bit of a French influence. But I took, so I did my twist on these recipes, but they were influenced by the heritage. The Chippewa Indians, for example, and they still harvest wild rice in Minnesota the way they used to. And so I have a Chippewa-inspired menu. I have a, I have a Polish-inspired menu. So my pierogi, of course, being Southern, I put sweet potato and bacon and top them with sauteed beet greens and Swiss chard. So they're very colorful and lighter and a little different. So the upper Mississippi, and then the Twain country, and it was kind of interesting because Missouri can be, in one aspect, the most boring state on the river, and I don't want to offend anyone if anybody's from Missouri, but you don't think of it. But when you really delve into the history, It once was a major wine producer because the German immigrants found, it's kind of an interesting story. They were sold a bill of goods. There was basically a scam that they took the city plot from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and said that the certain part of Missouri was like this, and they sold land to all of these German immigrants. And they arrived, well, it wasn't Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I mean, it was just rocks and hills. And they made the best of it and figured out how to grow grapes there. And so the Missouri wine region is really interesting, the food there. So and of course, everybody loves Mark Twain, and I would have slept with him for sure if I had him. So, sorry. I mean, he's just, I just loved him.
He would have slept with you.
So he was great, just loved him. So Twain Country from Hannibal, Missouri. I'm so glad my mother's not here. From Hannibal, Missouri to the confluence of the Arkansas River. And the confluence of the Arkansas River was, I do P. Allen Smith's, he has a gardening show, and I do cooking segments, so I've spent a lot of time on his farm. And with my love of cooking and his love of growing things, it was just this great confluence. So it seemed appropriate. That's where the Arkansas River meets Mississippi, and it seemed like a great stopping point for the middle section. And I have a farm-to-table supper that I do. In fact, one of my favorite recipes, I have some brochures that have a recipe in it. But when I go to Alan's farm, we just go out and gather dinner, figure out what we're going to do. And so one of the recipes that I do from that section of the book is a chicken pot pie with a bacon thyme biscuit crust, which is heavenly. And the other day, I was making some pork belly flatbread at King's Tavern, and I had leftover pork belly cubes, and I took pork belly. This isn't in the cookbook, but it is going to provoke me to write another book because it was so good. But it was pork belly and sweet potatoes and mustard greens. And I did that with veal stock and put the bacon thyme biscuit crust on that in a cast iron skillet. It was so much better than the chicken pot pie. I may have to post the recipe online. So, but a really great recipe. So that was the middle section and spending time at the farm. So then it's what I know best, Beale Street to the Bayou. And the American Queen, again, it's home ported in Memphis. But it was so great to tour. I would travel a lot when I would get on the American Queen. I don't have time to take a 9-day cruise all the time. And when I go, I'm very purposeful, like I'm going and I'm going to work on something with the cooks there. So I would often drive and get on the boat. So I saw the whole Mississippi River via land and then from the middle of the river, and it's just intriguing. I hope everyone gets the chance sometime to see the river from start to finish. It's just a great place. But so Beale Street to the Bayou was very easy, and then that becomes more personal. I have Twin Oaks, my home, and there I've got King's Tavern. I even managed to put a picture of the bottle of our new rum distillery in there. I was shameless, my editor let me. So that's more home to me. But it's been a great experience, and it was, just traveling and writing this book. So I hope y'all enjoy it. And I've got all kinds of little stories and history and in there. So, but anyway, I've enjoyed writing it, and I hope you enjoy reading it.
Looks beautiful. What's your favorite recipe in the whole book?
Oh, it was the chicken pot pie, but now it's the recipe. The pork belly tops that. But my shrimp and grits. My shrimp with smoked tomatoes over savory grits is one of my favorites, and I do biscuits galore in there. My butter biscuits. The sweet potato biscuits.
You're the biscuit queen, right?
I am. So, but my definitely the sweet potato biscuits with ham and pineapple jalapeno jam that's delicious. The dessert that I really love that I did that we serve at the Tavern, and it's very easy to make. We make homemade chocolate ice cream at the Tavern to make the dessert out of, but you could buy it. It's what I did do at the Tavern is I take classic desserts but do an ice cream twist on them. So, for example, black bottom pie, which was, and Carlane's from Natchez, you'll know this. black bottom pie. If you ever received during pilgrimage and had to wear the hoop skirt, the lunch, they always had black bottom pie, which was a ginger snap crust, chocolate custard, and whipped cream. Well, I do a ginger snap crust, dark chocolate ice cream, and then I whip cream cheese with powdered sugar and bourbon and put that on top, and that's a delicious dessert recipe.
Do you want to tell us about your breads that you do at King's Tavern?
Yeah, well, you've had them, right? You had them at Christmas time when you were home. But what I did, because we're opening a rum distillery there, and whenever I do something, I always have to have a little twist on it. And I did a lot of research, went to every place in New York that was doing, I didn't want to say pizza, but it's basically pizza, flatbread. But I did a wood-fired oven. We are the only restaurant in the state of Mississippi. I know for Natchez for a fact, and I feel pretty safe in staying in the state that doesn't have a deep fryer. Yeah, I think that's gonna be our claim to fame. But we get complaints about it all the time too.
It's going to be on your tombstone.
Yeah, it's gonna be, yeah. Well, I haven't lived without, I've got one at my house. But anyway, so when I did the Tavern, my idea was to do something with the dough. So I used to put sea salt and wild honey in my dough, but I thought, okay, we're making rum. My most popular flatbread is the brisket. It's caramelized onions with my brisket, which I cook for 5 hours.
Is it in here?
In a black pepper marinade. I don't have the brisket. It's in my other book.
Okay, I have your other.
In my other, and so it's caramelized onion and brisket with a horseradish cream. We do a smoked catfish with smoked catfish BLT with smoked apple cured bacon, and instead of lettuce, we do mustard greens on it. That's really good. We do caramelized onion with wild mushrooms and poached eggs and bacon, which is really good. So just kind of whatever we feel like doing, and we do wood-fired fish, and so it's fun.
Now, you're actually cooking at the restaurant, or do you have other people?
Well, I actually
You have so many things going on.
Yeah, no, I actually have a chef. I'm on chef number 2, but I'm very hands-on. But I'm trying to be hands-off as much as possible, which is hard. Yeah, I had, I was in a cast. I broke my ankle a few weeks ago in February, and was in a cast up to my knee. And my chef Allison, well, I can look on my phone and see people in the kitchen cooking, and I can see the bar, and that was my entertainment with the broken ankle. And there was this guy, this tall, nice-looking guy, hanging out in the kitchen every day. And Allison comes to me in tears, and she goes, I know I told you I'd work for a year, but I'm going to quit. I'm going to go work with this other chef at this new restaurant. So she quit, so I was cooking for 6 weeks until I could find.
When's your cast off?
After my cast came off, yeah. She stayed till the day the cast came off. But so I've just got a new chef, Bo McManus, and he's doing a good job. So
Is it downtown Natchez?
yeah, it's King's Tavern is it's Main Street, Franklin, Jefferson. So not far, but it's the oldest building on the Mississippi, standing on the Mississippi, in the Mississippi Territory. And the Natchez is 1789, so it's a great. So.
Is it really haunted?
I don't believe in ghosts, and I was kind of poo-pooing it, no. But I did have one experience. I was meeting my air conditioning man there, and I texted him that the back door, that I had come in the front door, it was open, and I was waiting. We were closed. No one was in there with me. I was the only one with my phone. And then I realized he usually parked in the back, so I picked up my phone to text him that I would open the back, and in the text box was the word ghost. And that's a true story. No, it's probably predictive text, probably, butt dialed or whatever, but anyway, that's my ghost story. John, you have?
So having done like so many different kinds of cuisine, you've got the West Coast, you were doing biscuits and blues in San Francisco, you're in Minneapolis, now you're in Natchez, and up and down the Mississippi. What do you want to do next? What is on your bucket list that you haven't really done?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I'd like to go to the south of France for 6 months and do nothing but go to the market and cook for people I love. I keep saying that's what I'm going to do. I don't see that in my future because we have a rum distillery, and even though I'm not directly involved in that, I'm directly, when your husband and son are doing a business, it's hard to avoid it. And then with the, with the restaurant, so So I don't know, but food-wise, well, I'll tell you what is kind of interesting when you ask that. I have not perfected the art of beautiful desserts, and I've been finding myself, like when I'm at these bookstores and stuff, that there's a magazine out of Spain called Good Food. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's like a $35 beautiful magazine. But they do, I don't know if you know who Payard in New York, and everything is so beautiful. And I'm going, I want to learn how to do that. So that's maybe my next thing. I'm going to start ordering some of these gadgets and powders and play, well, for example, and I have made macaroons before, but you know how beautiful the macaroons are, the colored ones. What is it? Bodega or
Louis Bottega Louis.
Bottega Louis. They do beautiful ones.
I was just there
Yeah,
last
and
week.
I'm going,
Beautiful.
okay, I can do that. But the reality is, in Natchez, Mississippi, macaroons, the humidity, it's really tough.
Yeah.
But I'm determined to somehow figure it out. But then I've been having these weird dreams about eclairs lately, and I've got this idea for the Tavern to do ice cream eclairs and make those really beautiful with vibrant glazes and different ice creams in the middle. So maybe that's what I'm going to do, is ice cream eclairs.
Could be the new macaron.
Yeah, the new macaron.
I love
Yeah, so that's
it.
what so be on the lookout for that.
On
So
I love
looking
it.
out.
So what's the name of the rum?
Charbonneau rum.
Love
So
it.
there's a picture of the bottle on page. There's Twin Oaks, and then it's my cane syrup party that I talk about. Page 272 is a picture of the rum. But the other thing that's really fun at
Oh,
King's
wow.
Tavern is we do craft cocktails, and we have a liquor store upstairs, and everything is small batch, handcrafted. Like Magellan Gin is from France, and it's made out of irises. It's this beautiful color blue, and just unusual, kind of what we're doing, and finding other people that do that and supporting the craft manufacturers of small.
So Regina, can you talk about, because I know your first book you published yourself, like, you know, the pros and cons of like, would you go
Yeah.
back to doing your next book by
You know,
yourself?
I think so, and I'll tell you why. I'm a control freak, and you know, I mean, I just like doing, kind of being in control of everything. And and nothing. I think publishers are good for some things, but if you understand what you're trying to do, which I always have a pretty clear vision, I think it's better to do it now with self-publishing. It's just easier. It's not what it used to be in distribution. You know, if you've been around and you've had several books, and you know, you come to Book Soup, and which is a fabulous place, and I hope if I called and said I've got a new book that you'd have me back. But you know, once you kind of get your circuit and your outlets and social media, now I just think, and publishing is suffering, and I think that's probably why. But you also, I find, you give everything, you know, your agent gets this and your publisher gets this, and you go and you know,
You
you
get to do all
go,
the work.
really? But anyway, but I'm no regrets. I mean, I would do it all over again because I'd never done it. I was curious, so.
Did you get your own publicist, or are you doing it yourself? Because I know publishers usually have one, you know, marketing
Yeah.
person
They do.
who, like, and they have so many books coming out, and you kind of get
Yeah,
lost.
I mean, I'm part of that machine, you know, they do it. But when it comes down to, and I think with anything you do in life, it's kind of your passion for it and your self-promotion of, you have to believe in it, because even with really good publicists, they don't, you know, they sometimes can't tell the message without you. I mean, you have to be really clear of your vision and what you want to put out there, so.
It's to be. It's
Yeah,
up to be.
it's up to you, but yeah, anybody can do it, yes.
Are there any lessons that if you did go back to a publisher that you would do differently?
I think you have to find people that have total confidence in you. There were some things that I found where it was over edited, and it's almost like they insult, you know, it's insulting the intelligence of the reader, and I don't know, I'm left-handed. I think differently sometimes, but one example, like the Mississippi mud cookies. When I wrote the recipe, I put 1 cup plus half a cup plus half a cup or whatever. And they go 2 cups of chocolate chips divided. Well, you have to read the whole recipe to figure out how to divide it. And I'm really straightforward and simple, and you kind of know in the beginning if you've made cookies so many times that you don't have to read every line, that you kind of tell people up front what to do with the ingredients. So and my other book that I self-published, I always I had the ingredients. I think everybody here has that, but just the way I lay out the ingredients. So you have to find people that have a lot of confidence in you, and I think whenever you start that new relationship, it takes time to build the confidence. Probably my second book with them would be different, but when you're establishing that relationship for the first time, there's not a lot of confidence. Even my agent was going, I read one of your articles for the, Atlantic Monthly, and you use double negatives, and it's like, yeah, that's the way I talk. So, from Natchez, Mississippi. But anyway, so you just have to, I think, you get people that believe in you, and it works the best. So.
Good job.
I had a question about the riverboat. How involved are you with that? And what's that schedule?
Yeah.
And how you said it was a 9-day trip. Like where you start, where you end.
Yeah. Well, what I did with the American Queen, and I kind of had a little bit of an ulterior motive. When they came to talk to me, and they said, we'll come to Natchez 15 times a year. And I'm thinking, okay, this is great for our local economy to get the boat here. So part of my negotiations with them was to get them 30 times a year, and they come 29 weeks a year. So they're home ported in Memphis, and the most popular trip is Memphis to New Orleans, New Orleans to Memphis, and that takes 9 days. So we negotiated that, so it does the lower Mississippi River, and then when it gets hot in mid-June, they go up to the Ohio River, and then when it just is starting to turn into fall, they go from St. Louis to St. Paul back and forth. Then in November they come back to Natchez, November and December, and then they put it up in New Orleans to paint it, fix the paddle wheel and all of that, and it goes back on the river mid-February again. So it's off for 6 weeks. So I was very involved in the beginning. I created recipes, a whole recipe book, and did that. And as people got trained, I had to work a little less, but I'm pretty tied down because they come to me 29 weeks a year. And when they come to the house, when they come to Natchez, the guest on the American Queen can sign up for an entertaining class at my house for 35 people, and it starts at 1:30 in the afternoon. Well, what was happening, they have 430 passengers. So 35 sells out really fast. So then they added a 10:30 in the morning, and that sells out really fast. So then I'm up to 70 people. Then they added an 8:30 in the morning. So I have about 110 people a day, 3 different groups. And the movie Groundhog Day, where you wake up every day? I'll forget, did I say that at 8:30 in the morning, or was that 10:30, or am I repeating myself? But so I have to be on and do, and what I do, and it's kind of an interesting thing, is I do this big spread of food, and they come into the twin parlors, and I show them around, and I tell them the history of the house. My house is historic, it's 1832. And then I tell them a little bit about my background, and I'll tell you my favorite story about my mother, and I always tell them this, and it's kind of my intro to bring them in to get something to drink. But and Carlene's from Natchez, you'll really appreciate this story, but I had a friend from San Francisco who was going to Natchez. He was a speaker at the Antiques Forum. He was a lighting designer, and I said, you've got to meet my parents, they're great. And he did, and he came back. He said, I have the funniest story. He said, your mother was charming, your father was great. He said, your mother offered me something to drink, and I looked at my watch, and it was 5 o'clock, and I was speaking at 6. He said, do you have something non-alcoholic? And he said she turned to my father and said, JP, do we have any beer or wine? And then I tell people, welcome to Natchez, where beer and wine are considered non-alcoholic. So, but I lived in California long enough to know that's not the case. So, but I always have different Southern cocktails and different ideas for entertaining preset on the table. And then I have almond iced tea, which is a great non-alcoholic drink that I offer people to let them know that I do know the difference. So anyway, but I have this array of food, and people walk around the garden and go look at the house, and they visit with me, and then I bring them back in the dining room, and everything on the table except for the little tomato sandwiches came out of the freezer. They were things that were made ahead and easy, and I pride myself on teaching people when they come how to entertain effortlessly, that everything can be made ahead so you can enjoy your guests. So the cheese pennies are in here. There's a little river tea or something. There are a lot of the dishes that I do, but the cheese pennies can be made ahead. Even my blackberry creme brulee trifle, I make and put in the freezer. I went to Catholic school for so many years. I love to break rules, and everybody said, you can't put glass in the freezer. Well, of course, I wouldn't put my great-grandmother's trifle bowl, but I buy Walmart, anchor hocking trifle bowls, and I make 6 of them at the time and put them in the freezer. But so I'm able to make everything ahead and really enjoy. In fact, there's a great recipe in here for a what is it called? A whiskey sour punch in here that my mother used to do for her bridge club, but it's a great recipe that freezes and it's like slushy, really good, that can be made ahead. So I just, I believe in enjoying your guest and not being tied to the kitchen. So, but this has been fun to see everyone. Thank you.
You can hold that, or you can hold that. I would take
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to take a picture of you.
Fantastic.
Yeah.